Well, hello. Today we'll get right to the point and show you how to use a stylistic technique that's most useful when the main point is something that you're working hard to avoid addressing directly. There's gotta be a better name for that. The esteemed teams of Quintillion Institute researchers have done it once again, this time by rediscovering a word about words that might just be one of the funnest words to say: periphrasis. Of course, if you prefer the Latin, circumlocution is a term that means the same thing and that probably more people know, but it's also considerably more boring to say. At any rate, periphrasis involves talking around the thing that you actually mean to say, usually by replacing a single word with many words. For example, instead of saying umbrella, you might say that thing that you hold over your head in order to protect yourself from rain. Periphrasis is often scorned, though, because the people with opinions have generally adopted the opinion that it's unnecessary and ridiculous to use many words where one will do. It's almost as if all the newspaper editors have got us convinced that every word we use costs us something. And it is possible that there are far too many cases of periphrastic excess, where talking around the point comes off more as an affectation than a stylish gesture. And I'll admit, there's probably little need for a food critic to describe spaghetti and meatballs as wheaty strands with herby orbs of beast. It's a pretentious and overblown description for such a simple dish. But there's more going on here than just using more words than are necessary. So if we stop to think about why our hypothetical food critic would write something like that, we can see that there is inherent value in periphrasis, even if it doesn't work very effectively in every context. So why might we think that this instance of periphrasis is a little too pretentious for a food review? Well, probably because that's not a context where we expect to see poetry. And you'd have to admit that though ridiculous, herby orbs of beast is somewhat poetic, and in fact I think our poetry would be a whole lot worse off if not for periphrasis. Even as far back as old Anglo-Saxon poetry, we can see poetic examples of periphrasis. For example, calling the sea a whale road or death the sleep of the sword. These are not the most direct or efficient ways to label something, but they're also not meant to be. These instances of periphrasis create opportunities for new images and connections that simple nouns just couldn't offer. So if you look up at the night sky and see scattered twinkle speckles instead of the stars, don't feel bad about it, but also maybe don't use it in an astronomy paper. It is, after all about context. But periphrasis isn't just good for poetry. It's also really useful in situations where you might want to avoid saying something distasteful or unpleasant. Why are people always powdering their noses, making pit stops, or visiting the little boys' room? Well, because periphrasis allows them to avoid saying scatological things in public. All of these phrases use more words than might be strictly necessary, but I'm sure most people would much rather put up with the circumlocution than the direct reality. Similarly, you'd have to be uniquely cruel to look somebody in the eye and say you're bad at your job, so you're fired. Periphrasis allows you to get the point across in a much more humanely delicate way. Maybe with something like, your recent performance reviews have all turned up troubling news, so I'm afraid we're going to have to part ways. We're sorry to see you go. Sometimes, as Richard Lanham has pointed out, you need to use too many words in order to show that you understand the seriousness of the situation. Being too direct can come off as glib or unfeeling, and that is not the stance you want to take when you're forcing someone into unemployment. Of course, periphrasis also has some strictly functional applications too. Our dictionaries wouldn't exist without them. Just try, I dare you, to define a word without periphrasis. And you can't underestimate the value of periphrasis when you just don't know the name of something. I remember asking somebody once what the twisty grabby handle thing on a door was because I just didn't know how to say doorknob in Portuguese. In the case of dictionaries or missing words, periphrasis allows us to communicate in situations where communication might otherwise be impossible. Is it the most direct and effective way to refer to things in the world? Well, no, but it's a great backup in a pinch. To summarize then, periphrasis isn't just a bad habit of pretentious and wordy writers. It also has many worthwhile and legitimate uses, whether you're adopting a poetic style, trying to stay tactful, or negotiating a breakdown in communication. So it would be unfair to say that periphrasis is always wrong, and I hope that you'll be able to find many creative and useful ways to put it to work. It would be especially fun if they showed up somewhere in the comments. But with that, we'll leave you till next time. As always, I'm inclined to express my fond and grateful feelings and to extend an encouraging plea to familiarize yourself with the buttons designated for expressing your approval and for becoming a subscriber, preferably by giving them the old tappa-tappa. Wait, you have whose lawyers on the phone? All this periphrasis must be like chum in the water. Oh, they sound serious. Well, okay, I'll take it in my office.